Every army has deserters. But when thousands of soldiers began leaving, hiding, escaping across borders, choosing prison over the front, or disappearing into civilian life, this is no longer just a discipline problem. It is a crisis. The Russian invasion of Ukraine has pulled hundreds of thousands of men into the trenches. Some are defending their homeland, others are part of an invading army. And every day, on both sides, there are men who decide they cannot continue. They walk away despite severe punishment. But the same word, deserter, hides two very different realities. In Ukraine, some soldiers break after years of defending their country with no clear end, too little rotation, bad commanders, untreated wounds, and exhaustion that becomes impossible to carry. In Russia, many men are trapped by contracts, mobilization, threats, prison logic, forced return to the front, and a state that increasingly treats soldiers as property to be dragged back into the war. So why are thousands fleeing the Russia-Ukraine war? What finally pushes a soldier to run? What happens to him afterward? And what does this desertion crisis reveal about the two armies and about the future problems waiting for both countries after the war? I am Elvira Bary, a writer born in the Soviet Union. Today, we'll look inside the hidden world of deserters. Who leaves the Ukrainian and Russian armies? Why they run? How they survive in hiding? And what both states are doing about a problem they cannot fully admit. Here's our roadmap. Ukraine's breaking point. Why defenders walk away. Russia's human trap. Why invaders flee. Life in hiding. What happens after a soldier disappears. Two armies, two deals. How Ukraine and Russia handle desertion differently. The bill comes due. What this crisis will mean after the war. If you'd like to keep getting this kind of insight, please subscribe, like, share, join my think tank, support through PayPal or Super Thanks, or tap Hype Points. That is how this channel stays independent and keeps doing deeper analysis. And if you are listening on Spotify, follow the show so the next episode lands in your feed automatically. Thank you for being here. Let's begin. Ukraine's breaking point. Desertion is difficult to measure because military statistics mix together very different cases. Ukraine distinguishes between unauthorized absence and desertion, but the published figures may include repeat offenses, soldiers who later returned, and men who never intended to leave permanently. In early 2026, Ukraine acknowledged that roughly 200,000 soldiers were AWOL, although it had already stopped releasing full statistics. Russia is even less transparent. Court records show tens of thousands of prosecutions for refusing service, while a United Nations report estimated that more than 50,000 Russian soldiers had deserted since the invasion began. The true numbers on both sides are probably higher, but numbers alone conceal the most important difference. Ukraine soldiers are walking away from an army defending their country, often leaving exhausted comrades with an even heavier burden. Many of those Ukrainian soldiers began as volunteers. They joined in 2022 when Russian columns were moving toward Ukrainian cities and the country's survival looked uncertain. Some had already served since 2014. They accepted danger because the purpose was clear: defend their homes. What broke them later was often the belief that their sacrifice had become endless and badly managed. Here's one human story. Yaroslav enlisted in 2015. During the full-scale war, he became a deputy platoon commander in mechanized units. He said his commanders repeatedly sent soldiers across open ground under drone surveillance and failed to learn from avoidable losses. In the summer of 2023, his group contained roughly 40 to 50 men. According to Yaroslav, about half were killed. He stayed longer than most. Then the panic attacks began. At home, he woke at night gasping for air. Eventually, he went AWOL. Another volunteer who fought near Avdiivka, Victor, injured his shoulder when part of a building fell on him. He said he was treated with injections and ordered back. He left for medical help and never returned. Later, when he tried to rejoin his brigade, it rejected him. He now repairs military vehicles without charge. Other cases follow the same pattern from different directions. A volunteer trained as an artillery specialist is transferred into infantry because a depleted unit needs bodies. An older mobilized man arrives with a chronic injury and discovers that he must walk for miles under drones. A wounded soldier receives pain-killing injections and is ordered back before his body has recovered. A serviceman asks to transfer away from a commander he no longer trusts and finds that the commander can simply block the request. None of these situations automatically justifies abandoning comrades, but each one weakens the bargain that holds an army together. A soldier accepts extraordinary risk because he believes the mission has a purpose. He also expects that his sacrifice has a limit, even if that limit cannot be fixed precisely during a national emergency. Ukraine has struggled to provide that limit. Many soldiers who enlisted at the beginning of the invasion have served for years without knowing when they will be released. Manpower shortages make predictable rotation difficult. The fewer soldiers remain, the longer everyone else must stay. The longer they stay, the more likely another person is to break. That creates a vicious loop. Russia's human trap. Russia's deserters come from very different backgrounds. Some were professional soldiers before the invasion. Others were mobilized in September 2022 or signed contracts after regional authorities offered life-changing payments. Some were young conscripts who were pressured into contracts. There are also thousands of Ukrainian citizens from occupied Donetsk and Lugansk who were seized in mass mobilization campaigns and absorbed into Russian forces. Some never signed Russian contracts at all. Russia later declared them soldiers and prosecuted them when they left. Mediazona found almost 3,000 men from those occupied territories wanted for desertion. Their cases expose the absurdity of the system. Russia invaded their country, forced them into its army, and then accused them of betraying the Russian state. For Russian citizens, the trap often closes gradually. One conscript described relentless pressure to sign a contract. He finally signed it in September 2024. As deployment approached, he began considering ways to injure himself. He feared that after deployment, he would never make it back alive. He eventually escaped to Armenia. Other soldiers choose prison deliberately. They tell lawyers that they want a real sentence because even several years behind bars seem safer than another assault. But Russia often denies them that option. For years, military courts handed down suspended sentences in AWOL cases. This looked lenient until the soldiers discovered what it meant. He remained in military service and could be brought back to the trenches. In 2026, the process had become more direct. Mediazona documented holding sites where captured deserters waited to be transferred back. One soldier said men screamed that they would rather serve prison time. Military police removed them from cells by force and sent them toward their units anyway. Officers encouraged prisoners to sign requests saying they were returning voluntarily. The promise was that the criminal case could be suspended and perhaps erased if the soldiers survived and earned a decoration. The army also pressures families. The Insider interviewed relatives of deserters who described military police appearing at workplaces or hidden apartments. One man was found after someone noticed him entering a store. His wife said officers handcuffed him and drove him away without explaining where he was being taken. That is why a Russian soldier may flee repeatedly. He escapes the front, is caught, returned, and escapes again. For him, desertion is an attempt to choose the punishment most likely to leave him alive. Life in hiding. In Ukraine, many soldiers who left service simply return to civilian life and hope the overloaded state does not notice them. 3 deserters interviewed by the Kyiv Independent found construction work. Some worked beside other former soldiers who had also left their units. They still visited restaurants and cafes, even though they were officially wanted. This makes perfect sense if we look at the numbers. Ukraine has hundreds of thousands of open military absence cases, but it doesn't have hundreds of thousands of officers available to investigate them. Police must also deal with ordinary crime, Russian attacks, collaborators, and wartime security. In a large city, a deserter may therefore live almost normally for months, but there are still restrictions. He will have to avoid registered addresses and official employment. He may rely on cash jobs, relatives, or friends who do not ask questions. A routine document check can end his civilian life. He cannot know whether a visit to a government office, a hospital, or a railway station will lead to detention. Some men remain indoors and depend on their wives and parents. Others continue helping the war effort informally, like Victor, a skilled mechanic who repairs military vehicles free of charge, even though he never returned to his brigade. He abandoned military service but did not abandon Ukraine. Now let's look at Russia, where this kind of life in hiding is more dangerous. Some deserters stay with relatives. Others move between apartments or hide in remote houses. They accept cash work but avoid bank cards and employers who demand documents. Some are found because they continue using an ordinary mobile phones. One man even registered as a taxi driver through a major Russian platform. Others are discovered when military investigators pressure relatives or trace employment records. Since there are much fewer official AWOL cases in Russia and the state has more resources, it can trace more men and send them back to the front lines. That is why many men prefer to escape the country, heading to Kazakhstan, Armenia, or Kyrgyzstan. Russians can enter some of those countries without the international passport that military personnel often lack. But proximity to Russia creates its own danger. Farhad Singashin fled after Russia announced mobilization. In Kazakhstan, he worked briefly in a restaurant and banquet hall. Later, publicity around his case made him fear Russian attention. He moved cities, changed SIM cards, avoided his registered addresses, and shared a room with another deserter. His new life was not prison, but it was built around the same rule: remain invisible. Kazakhstan has not routinely extradited men solely for desertion, but Russian wanted lists still create arrests and legal uncertainty. Armenia is considered somewhat safer, yet Russian military and security structures maintain a presence there. Deserters remember cases in which men were seized or disappeared. Reaching Europe is even harder. France admitted 6 Russian deserters in 2024 and allowed them to apply for asylum. By early 2026, however, only a few dozen Russian military deserters had received political asylum across the European Union. European caution has legitimate reasons. A government must establish whether an applicant participated in crimes before leaving. Desertion doesn't automatically erase responsibility. The result is a slow system in which men can remain trapped for years. One young Russian, Daniil Makhmetov, reached France after avoiding military service and crossing several countries. In June 2026, he faced transfer to Lithuania under the European Union's Dublin rules because Lithuania was treated as his first country of entry. His lawyers feared that this could eventually place him at risk of returning to Russia. The contradiction is difficult to ignore. Every Russian soldier who deserts removes manpower from the invading army. Yet the countries supporting Ukraine have never built a consistent system to receive, investigate, and protect those who refuse to fight. 2 armies, 2 deals. Every army punishes desertion, as otherwise it would cease to exist. But discipline depends on a bargain. The soldier gives up freedom and accepts danger. In return, the army must use his life for legitimate purpose, provide medical care, and protect him from criminal commanders. Ukraine and Russia are breaking this bargain in different ways. Both armies inherited parts of the Soviet command tradition. Information flows upward slowly. Complaints may return to the officer being accused. The soldier is expected to adjust to the institution, even when the institution is destroying him. Both armies also need people desperately. That makes commanders reluctant to release anyone, including the wounded, the mentally exhausted, and specialists who could serve more effectively somewhere else. Ukraine has begun building ways around this trap. A soldier returning from AWOL can apply for the Army Plus app or report to the military police. He may be directed to a reserve battalion rather than immediately return to his former commander. Combat units can issue recommendation letters, and soldiers with health restrictions can be assigned to support roles. A first-time offender may also seek exemption from criminal liability after returning to service, although a court must approve it. These procedures remain bureaucratic and imperfect, but Ukraine has created something Russia lacks: an official argument over soldiers' rights. The Office of the Military Ombudsman began operating in January 2026. Soldiers and their families can submit complaints. The office can conduct inspections and press for changes to military regulations. Not every complaint is fixed, but abuse is at least recognized as a problem that can weaken the army. Now compare that with the case of Anton Putyatov, a Russian mobilized soldier. After deserting, he was returned to the same regiment he had tried to escape. His comrades beat him and took his possessions, including a tiny sock belonging to his newborn son that he carried as a talisman. They told him they would shoot him once he reached the front. He deserted again. Putyatov recorded a video saying he was ashamed but willing to accept 5 or 10 years in prison. He renounced his rank and asked only not to be returned to that regiment. The system refused his choice. After another arrest, he was placed in the camp holding around 180 soldiers. Wounded men lived in canvas tents. Every few weeks, groups of 80 to 90 were loaded onto transport and sent back toward the war. Another detainee kept trying to reach his pregnant wife to learn whether they were expecting a boy or a girl. When his unit arrived to collect him, he clung to the bars and shouted that he preferred prison. Military police pulled him away, handcuffed him, and returned him to the front. This is the decisive difference. Ukraine needs soldiers to defend the country, but public pressure has produced return procedures, transfer mechanisms, legal representation, and civilian oversight. Russia increasingly treats the deserter as lost state property. The court is useful only if it returns the body to military control. If prison would remove that body from the war, the state may deny even prison. The bill comes due. When the fighting ends, both Russia and Ukraine will inherit thousands of people stranded between the identities of soldier and criminal. Ukraine will face the more painful internal reckoning. Soldiers who remained at their posts will demand fairness. Some watched friends die, while another man disappeared. A blanket amnesty could tell them that their sacrifice counted for less than obedience to personal survival. But prosecuting every case with the same severity would be equally destructive. A soldier who left during an assault is not identical to one who disappeared from a hospital after being denied treatment. A man absent for 3 days is not identical to one who spent years living under a false identity. Ukraine will need to examine motive, duration, location, previous service, medical evidence, and the consequences for the unit. The military must also investigate what happened before each departure. Russia's future problem will be broader and darker. A future Russian government would have to decide whether these living soldiers are criminals, political opponents of the war, or potential witnesses. Some deserted before reaching Ukraine. Some left after witnessing abuse or receiving criminal orders. Others spent months fighting before their own lives became threatened. European asylum systems face the same distinction. International refugee guidance recognizes that refusing participation in a particular conflict can support a protection claim, especially when the war or its methods violate international law. But people implicated in war crimes can be excluded from refugee protection. The practical lessons are already visible. Soldiers need predictable periods away from combat. Medical decisions must belong to doctors rather than commanders desperate for manpower. Transfers require an appeal mechanism. Reports of illegal orders must reach someone outside the chain being accused. Professional soldiers and mobilized civilians also need a lawful path to request non-combat service when trauma or changed beliefs make continued participation impossible. None of this will eliminate desertion. Some people will always run from danger or responsibility, but mass desertion will become much less likely when the official system offers a bearable exit. Before you go, I want to ask you something. Have you ever seen someone abandon a duty, not because they were lazy or cowardly, but because the institution had already broken its side of the bargain? Please tell me in the comments. If this video helped you understand the disorder crisis behind the Russian-Ukrainian war, please like, subscribe, and share it with one person who still thinks desertion is always a simple story of cowardice. And if you want to support this channel directly, you can join my think tank, leave a super thanks, support through PayPal, or tap hype points to help this episode travel further. For those listening on Spotify, follow the show so you don't miss the next one. Thank you for watching. See you next time.